The World Cup final is not an ordinary day. It's a special day. And you cannot trick your brain into thinking it's an ordinary day. Sun Tzu says something beautiful in The Art of War. He says the most important person in battle is the person standing next to you. If you don't trust him, you're going to die. Jordan also said, pressure is a privilege. You can thrive in an ecosystem where others are struggling to even survive. There are people who think and talk about their problems now. Those people will pull you down. Every 6 months, you are 6 months older, and biologically, your body is degenerating. People think the best way to hydrate is to drink water. That's wrong. You'll die highly achieved, but highly unfulfilled.
Today's podcast is going to be very special because we have a special guest with us, Shayamal Vallabhjee. He's a sports scientist, sports psychologist, and a performance coach. So welcome to Level Supermind. Shayamalji, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling absolutely great. Thank you for welcoming me.
Yep. So with me, Ayush Anand is there. He's Level Supermind's co-founder. Ayush Anand, बोलिए आपको क्या लगता है?
So today we are very lucky to have you here. We are very excited because we'll talk a lot about Indian diet, how we can get more from the mind. You have so many interesting stories that we want out in the public. So before this podcast started, we were talking about a few stories that you would want everyone to know. So let's start with one story that you think is very, very crucial for everyone to know.
A story, I don't know if it's so much a story as opposed to a fact, but we all know that success at the highest level is 99% mental, 1% physical. Many inspiring athletes have already told us that. In under 60 seconds, I don't even have to know your name or your age, but I can predict your probability of success based on your psychometric markers just using a series of tests. Because this is what I've been studying and specializing in for a very, very long time. And that's one of the new frontiers of unlocking performance, is our brain's ability to process information. And if we work in alignment with that, we've all been studying strengths for the longest time. The strength of the brain is the next frontier.
Wow, that's very interesting. Can we break it down and understand this a bit more? So there is a test that helps you know your sport talent fit and how you can become better in that. Is there any, for the audience, they can Google something, how to know more? What are the questions in that?
No, there's no one particular test. I run a whole battery of tests. Okay. Tests on the subconscious mind and tests on the conscious mind. All of them are validated tests. One such example could be the Big Five. The other could be psychogeometrics. I use colors, I use shapes, I use all sorts of things to peel away the layers of the mind. And what I'm trying to do is integrate the conscious mind, which is your learned skill. So every time you're doing work or every time you're playing a sport, there is a learned component in there. But sport happens so fast that the subconscious mind could be the driver of that. If these two minds are different and operating on different platforms, the probability of success under pressure is very difficult. If we bring these two together, as the pressure rises up, your probability of success rises up with that. This is why some people thrive under pressure. I think Jordan also said pressure is a privilege. He says that because when you bring these two components together, you can thrive in an ecosystem where others are struggling to even survive.
So have we done this test with our Indian football team? Because you also coach them. And is there any interesting story about our Indian football team where this test has helped them? Any specific player where we can get to know inside what's happening?
Yes, we've got a lot of data on them. Every single athlete in every single sports team, I run through this battery of tests and I'm constantly peeling away data. So one really interesting thing that I did recently, coming back now from the World Cup qualifiers, is I ran them through a profile of mood state. Now I run this test about 48 hours before competition to ascertain what the mood of that athlete is. Now, this test breaks up mood into 6 different stages. So you're looking at tension, you're looking at anger, you're looking at vigor, you're looking at anxiety, confusion, and depression. These are the 6. Traditionally, we looked at vigor as the only positive marker. And you looked at the other 5 markers as being detrimental markers for performance. But I've discovered something really interesting now. I discovered that anger and vigor, If these two scores are high, then there's most likely that person's going to have a great performance. Okay. Now, if I asked anyone, who would you think is the most tense or the most stressed athlete in any sports team? There's a good chance you'll tell me the person who wasn't performing. And that's counterintuitive. Actually, the tense athlete is the one who's performing at the best because they're trying to carry the weight, they're trying to carry the burden of performance on themselves. So now just this one insight has opened an entire canvas with how we manage our athletes. Once people start performing better, we start removing things off their plate. So they've got fewer things to take, fewer decisions to make, and they can focus on that. Now, using data like this, together with subconscious assessments, together with things like Big Five that give me an indication of a person's conviction, determination, the ability to communicate, and the willingness to be open to ideas, I now have such a canvas of data that I can literally profile everyone and decide how they should work together. I created this algorithm on the basis of personality and psychometric markers, exactly like what you saw in Moneyball that used data. I came up with a theory where I fundamentally believe that I can engineer the perfect sports team based on cognition, how they relate to stress and how they communicate with each other. And this is the data I'm connecting and putting it together. And I tell you, it's a fascinating world for me.
It's very interesting to hear, and I don't know if you are allowed to say it, but I would just ask, is there any use case where such analysis has led to a better performance, if there is a story or something?
There's not, I won't name anyone, but what we started to do is we started to, in a football team, for example, understand the personality markers related to specific positions. So for example, I know a person who is very rational, very mathematical, very cognitive and logical. They make the best defenders, for example. Now, let's assume I take another personality type, someone who is a natural leader, highly charismatic, highly confident. Or if I take a creative person, a person who loves their own ideas, very free thinking. If I put him in the defense, the likelihood of him moving out of position, breaking that back line is highly, highly probable. So we're starting to see, we're getting a pool of defenders, and now we're trying to pick people whose personality predisposes them to success in there. Now, if you look at a person who is a great striker, a striker is the spotlight. A striker is a person who has to be creative. They have to operate by their own set of rules. So if you take a person with a very structured approach to everything, they're very easy to read, right? So they don't make great. You need a person who's has that selfish tendency. He wants the ball to always come to him. He wants everyone to pass it to him. He has crazy ideas. He has phenomenal self-confidence and belief in himself, and he believes anything is possible. That's the personality type we want to put in front there, because that's when the magic happens. So by breaking things like this down, we're now starting to understand what predisposes people to success. And it has nothing to do with how you kick a ball. It has everything to do with how your brain processes everything in 2/100ths of a second.
So there's an inherent quality in everyone. So more dynamic and more powerful person, maybe if I'm not wrong, they have tendency to become an attacker, and more rational and more calm and collected, those people have a tendency to become a defender, to plan everything from the back.
No, more creative people. People who are more creative tend to be better strikers. People who are more rational and more logical tend to be better defenders. And people who have this natural leadership style are people who become great midfielders who control it. And if you break up the performance of a football team, you'll notice that. You'll notice that the people in the center of a pitch, your midfielders, they have to control it. They're in that transition phase of moving the ball from the back to the front, dropping the high press, bringing up that high press. They control it. So that is that leadership personality. Your defense line needs to be rock solid, and they need to maintain that barrier. They need to transition together, fall together, and you need to be able to control that. So this is what we're looking for.
This is very interesting. I can see it in the business also. Like same thing, if we make a team where the creative and let's just say a little bit more out of boundary should be the face, the admin and the backend people should be there's so much relation. What about goalkeeper? What characteristics they have?
Yeah, that's interesting. We're starting to see different aspects with goalkeepers. Right now, I obviously have only 3 in my team that I'm testing. 2 of them have the same sort of personality type. Those are the 2 that are playing most often. We're getting different ones coming in on the side. I'm starting to now structure and have a look. The one thing with goalkeepers, though, is height does play a big difference. Now, I'm looking at psychometric markers and not physiological markers. So right now, in our keepers, we're starting to see a slight differential in height, but because we got predominantly just these 2 personalities that are playing, the data isn't as validated as I'd like it to be. But having said that, I am starting to map the best goal scorers from the penalty spot. And I'm starting to see trends there as well. The people who are highly confident and the people who are going to take it and know what they're going to do. Because the mind is so tricky, is that, a lot of people, you wouldn't believe it, at the moment of even kicking the ball, they don't know where they're kicking it to because they're indecisive. And even in business, decisiveness is the key critical skill. You see, the human brain is very bad with dealing with uncertainty. It's great with dealing with an outcome. Last week, I was having a conversation with someone and they said, I lost a parent 3 weeks ago and I processed it and I was able to get over it. And my child, I was late for a meeting, okay, and my child was holding me back and I screamed at her in such a way I felt so embarrassed and disgraceful, and I don't know what is happening there because I just lost a parent and I'm able to process that. I said, brilliant example. One feels bigger than the other, but one is, it's finished. There's an outcome. The person you've lost them, they passed away. The brain can process the outcome. Here, you're late, but the meeting's not over. So there's uncertainty. The brain cannot deal with uncertainty. And fear as an emotion is projected into the future, and the future is always uncertain. This is why most people have a fear of failure, because the mind's projecting there. And the only way to circumnavigate fear is with decisive thinking and positive action.
You said a very, very interesting thing, that mind is very tricky. And before the podcast, we were discussing that at its core, it's a mind game. Everything boils down to how you operate your toolbox, the mind. So what do you want? What can you explain us the entire relationship of mind, body, and life? How do you view it?
Yeah, the mind is the key driver. It's the elephant. But remember, when you feel stressed, everything shows up physiologically in your body. So you'll have sweaty palms, your heart would be racing, you'll have butterflies in your tummy. All of these symptoms show up physiologically, which kind of knocks you off center. But it started off with a thought in there. So what is the relationship between the mind and body? Is that the stronger, the fitter, the more resilient the body is, the less likely you are to feel the subtle symptoms that are a byproduct of that thought process produced in the mind. So this is the strong relationship between why you need to have a healthy vehicle, a healthy body. Because if the body is compromised, the slightest external stress will trigger off a very big physiological response in you. So for example, what am I talking about? Let's break it down into numbers. An athlete has a resting heart rate of say 35 to 40 beats per minute. An average sedentary person may have a resting heart rate of 80 to 90. Now, when an athlete has a stress entering that system, 35 to 40 is going to move to 45. When a person who's sedentary and having a terrible lifestyle has a stress in his system, he's now moved from 90 to 120, which means he's closer to max and his body is now moved into a survival mode. Once it moves into survival mode, the amygdala kicks in, which is looking for it's an alarm system looking for threats, right? He has no ability to relax. He's in pure survival mode. The athlete who has a stress in his system can still be thriving in an ecosystem because he has a body resilient enough to manage that physiological shift as a byproduct of that thought. This is the relationship between the two. And what do you want to do?
So the human brain likes 4 things. And when you start to understand how the human brain works, you have its user manual and everything becomes really easy. So the first thing is it likes stories, which means that the only way the human brain can retain unrelated pieces of information is if we weave a narrative through it. So the first one is stories. The second thing it likes is symmetry. So if you walk into a room and a picture frame happens to be crooked, your brain will not be able to look at that and even think because Asymmetry is a sign of danger. The first thing you want to do is go and straighten it before you can even focus on anything else. Even when you go and look at fruit or look at anything that's asymmetrical, you associate with danger. So we got stories, we got symmetry. The third is it likes shortcuts. Now you've seen these slides on Instagram and WhatsApp where letters and numbers are mixed up and your brain can read everything. That's because the brain doesn't read everything. It finds patterns and it finds clues and it stitches it together to make assumptions. That's how it works quickly. And the fourth thing it likes is it likes familiarity. It will repeat a process that is familiar over and over. This is why we train athletes and we tell everyone to please create a routine. Because when you create a routine, you know and you're teaching your brain how to show up. I always tell my athletes, I said, the warm-up is very little about preparing you physically, but it's about letting your brain know it needs to switch on right now. And the COVID example that I always give, people were struggling with productivity because they all had a routine they were unaware of. They woke up in the morning, they jumped on a train, they traveled to work, and they knew that when they got off at this station, I'm going to have to switch on. But all of a sudden, they had to just move from one room to another, and they didn't create a routine that allowed the brain to switch on. When there's no routine, the brain does not know how to show up. It happens with sleep, it happens with productivity, it happens with creativity, it happens with performance in every aspect. So once you understand these 4 drivers of the brain, and you start to bring levers in that allow you to operate on these 4 drivers, life becomes significantly easy. And once you know this here, and I bring this into my world of sport, I know how to communicate with my athletes as well. I know what is the information their brain's processing and how to present it to them. And it becomes very, very fascinating. Like one interesting example is I've now used data to calculate a team communication score. So I have seen that if I have a score above, say, 840 total score of all the team players, the intra-team communication on the field is amazing. Now, what happens if I got a really, really talented youngster whose communication score is low? He's a great player. The probability of him fitting into this team is highly unlikely, but we need to raise his communication score. So a person who's naturally introverted or quiet, who doesn't like to speak, if you put him in a room, he's going to hide away in the corner. He's going to go closer to a wall because he's going to feel invisible. So what we started doing in our team is I've earmarked these players and I've given instructions to all the coaches and the senior players, bring these guys to the center of the room or keep them in the front row. If you bring them to the center of the energy, the likelihood of them speaking increases. And we're starting to see shifts in that data now moving up, and it's completely changed everything. So by doing this repeatedly, right, through neuroscience, to neuroplasticity, we've seen that the more you get them to talk, that aspect of their brain gets developed and that entire communication score starts to raise. Remember, the reason I'm so fascinated in personality is because you guys do a lot of work in meditation, do a lot of work in breath work. If I ask you, what was the impact of 6 months of meditation on you? You could tell me, yes, I feel calmer, yes, I feel more resilient, but ask you, what's the data to support that? Most people don't know. When you use a practice like that, that's shifting how you show up on a day-to-day basis, the strongest marker is in the shift in your personality. So this is what I'm also fascinated in. Now, not only am I profiling athletes, I'm also creating a list of interventions that each brain and each personality type responds the best to. So when we say meditation, meditation is not perfect for everybody, but some people respond more to it. Others respond more to other sorts of activities. It could be more play, it could be more creative stuff, it could be more solitude practices. We create a whole bunch of things that each person responds to. And if I need to calm some people down, I don't get them to meditate. I just create a meditation that has complete sublingual programming and I push that into them. They just have to listen to that while they sleep. So once we start to understand this entire brain box and we create a toolkit to it, it becomes fundamentally easy to start molding that person into the direction that you want to, that predisposes them to success at the highest level.
This is very interesting. Is there any, I don't know, software, toolbox on internet where a normal public, a normal person, let's say a 16-year-old person can go and do these tests and then figure out what's his type and he wants to, let's say, crack an exam. So what he should do. Is there any service out there?
So all of the tests I use are scientifically validated. The reason why I do that is I want no one to question my data. So every test I use is open source and they have more than 1 million points to structure them. But let me give you some insight in how my work goes. Not only am I working with the athlete, I'm getting feedback on every athlete from all the coaches in the ecosystem. There's a good chance I'm speaking to all of their wives or their partners. When their family comes in there, I speak to their immediate family to get to know them. I'm trying to understand what is the personality of this person on the field versus out of the field and try to understand the polarity between these two. So when I run them through a data set, which is completely common, the insight I'm drawing from there is far greater than the insight you're going to get on a research paper. Let me give you one example. Most people have done a personality test. When you ask them what percentage of these results actually apply to you, they'll tell you 60, 70, 80%, they'll give you that. The reason they're able to identify that 80% is because they're taking that 80% score and they're attributing it onto their learned skill of what they do on a day-to-day basis. So if I say, hey, you're an introvert, you say, no, I interview people for a living every single day. How can I be an introvert? Because why? Your job, your learned skill has needed you to speak to people, so you're attributing that component. I ask him, hey, if I throw you into a random party, right, would you naturally go and speak to everyone? No, you'd stand in the corner. Why? Because your subconscious personality is that there, but a learned skill is something else. So I'm starting to pull data and understand the balance between what the subconscious driver is and what the conscious learned skill is. And this is critically important, guys, because why? When you raise stress in a system, a person will move away from what is conscious and learned to what is subconscious and natural. This is critical.
Yeah. We all are learning and we all are acquiring skills to perform at our high performance levels, right? So in your perspective, in your understanding, what is high performance, both physically and mentally?
Firstly, there's a difference between high performance and elite performance. High performance is any person raising the game. So today, if you can do 10 push-ups and tomorrow you do 12 push-ups, that's high performance. You've raised your game. What's elite performance? Elite performance means the world record for push-ups continuously may be 450. The bar is already set. Elite performance is where the bar is and you got to get to that bar. So I don't work in a high performance world because everybody is high performance. I work in an elite performance world where the bar is already set. I know I need to get 10 points with my Indian football team to qualify for the next stage of the World Cup. Everyone wants to win 100 meters in the Olympic final. Now, it's not about high performance. It's not about them getting better. It's about them crossing a 9.7 threshold. If they can't cross it, they got no chance of doing it. So differentiate the difference between high performance and elite performance and understand where you want to go. High performance is about you becoming a better version of yourself. Elite performance is of you becoming recognized as the best at what you do. And personality is one of the key drivers in elite performance. We have to start to peel away these layers. I was recently on a show where we were debunking this entire World Cup, and all of the experts, past legends that have played in 4 or 5 World Cups, are talking about strategy, they're talking about technique, they're talking about all sorts of decisions, the physicality of the players. And I said, guys, let's pause for a second. I said, every situation that you predetermined that India could have done better in, all of the players in that team they've rarely been super successful in that same situation multiple times in previous games, but they failed in this game. Now, what is the difference? The difference is the World Cup final is not an ordinary day. It's a special day. And you cannot trick your brain into thinking it's an ordinary day. So when a person cannot bring what is an ordinary performance to a special day, it has nothing to do with strategy or technique. It has everything to do with cognition. And I asked them, I have gone into locker rooms and asked coaches, I said, when you deliver a team talk, what percentage of the people in the room do you truly believe have got every aspect of your message? And they tell me 50%. I said, you are telling me that 50% of your players have understood what you want to, and then you want 100% of them to go and deliver that message. How is this even possible? Because we're not understanding. I said, if you don't understand the human brain, how on earth Can you understand its expectations and what it potentially can deliver and how to make it better?
What could we have done to win the World Cup? I'm just
No, I think I can't say what we could have done to win the World Cup, but I can tell you that if we run them through a battery of psychometric, psychological tests before that, 48 hours before, we would have been able to understand who had high anger scores, who was under phenomenal tension, who was having high anxiety scores, and we could have created interventions to either drop or raise or channelize these emotions, which could have produced a better outcome. You see, one of the big things is physiologically, excitement and anxiety feel the same. Sweaty palms, racing heart, butterflies in your tummy. Most athletes don't know whether they're nervous or whether they're excited. They don't even know how to differentiate between the emotions they feel. And if they cannot articulate it and differentiate it, how does an expert step in to even help them? We need to really start scratching the surface of teaching people awareness. The basics of meditation and mindfulness needs to be brought in. Because why? We're spending a phenomenal amount of money on tactical and technical and physical, but the biggest lever, the biggest driver of performance, which is cognition, is been left. And it's been left because people are scared of it. People are scared of what they don't understand. But it's a beautiful, beautiful canvas when you start to open that magic box.
Yeah. In one of these documentaries, The Last Dance, they have covered Michael Jordan's life. So he's a guy who drives everyone around him. He's a guy who has great leadership skills. So is there a difference between mindsets of a elite performer and a mediocre performer?
how's it different? Like, what
And
are the-
Ali, you know, there's something great. You know, I was giving a talk and people asked me, what is the difference between a good team and a great team? So I said, remember, every athlete on the planet, the Jordans, the Woods, even the people you don't hear of, they all practice for 3 to 4 hours a day. They all go to the gym for 2 hours a day. They all are seeing physios. They all are taking ice baths. They all are doing all of these things, sleeping 7.5, 8 hours a day. Now, if every athlete is doing this, what makes one better than another? The thing that makes one better than another is the standards that you're trying to adhere to. How hard are you pushing yourself in those 3 hours? How hard are you trying to recover? You know, what is the standard with which you're doing it? So what is the difference between a good team and a great team? Well, the first thing is in a poor team, in a bad team, no one is responsible for standards. In a good team, it's the coaching staff that are driving the standards. They are there early, they're pushing you, they're making sure you're hitting extra balls, bowling extra, taking a few extra swings, they're doing it. But in a great team, every single person in the team, every athlete is pushing and raising the bar of standards. They're holding each other accountable to standards. Sun Tzu says something beautiful in The Art of War. He says the most important person in battle is the person standing next to you. If you don't trust him, you're going to die. Why? Because you're going to look here when the threat is in front of you. It's the exact same thing with teams. Whether you're in a boardroom or whether you're in a sports field, the person you need to trust is the person next to you. How do you trust them? You trust them by them showing up and doing everything they physically and mentally can to get there. Once you know that they're doing everything they possibly can, the psychological safety in that room goes up. Once the psychological safety in the room goes up, anything is possible.
If from the heart I want to say this, I think you will become a great dad. You have you will parent your kid, hopefully, in so many ways. I think you will be raising a champion most likely because you know so much. It's so interesting.
When we were taking a break, I asked him, does your child, is he already into sports? So he said, yeah, he does skating and all.
Yeah, but knowing this much, I would like when I'll become a parent, if I become a parent, I would for sure learn all these things, study, so that structure is there. But you were talking about cognition, and we just had this discussion also. Is there any diet or something that I can do to improve my cognition for high stress jobs or for competitive students?
You know, the world of diet is a 10-hour podcast on its own. But you should understand, and we all know this, that there are 4 driving hormones in the brain: acetylcholine, GABA, serotonin, dopamine. Dopamine is your driver moving forward, your performance driver. Serotonin is your happy hormone. Okay, your acetylcholine and your GABA are your performance, your focus hormones. All of these the balanced regulation of this comes from the food we eat. Okay. So, yes, to answer your question, there are foods that optimize these hormones and optimize functionality in the brain. There are also a lot of other biohacks you can do. One of the simplest things to do is submerge the head in cold water or ice. Why? Because it's increasing the density of the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is what everything has to penetrate through. So when you have toxins in food, they go easier through the blood-brain barrier. Cold makes it more denser, harder for things to go and infiltrate the brain. Serotonin, which is in your gut, 90% of your serotonin determines your happy foods. So before going into types of foods you should eat, it's more important and easier to understand what we shouldn't eat, right? So we shouldn't be eating high preservative foods, for sure. We got to stay away from seed and nut oils. These are very, very bad, very toxic. Anything that's preserved and sits on a shelf for a prolonged period of time, you have to stay away with it because they carry so much of toxins and microplastics and pollutants that they seep in through the gut and get through the brain. Now, a large percentage of time I tell people, I even tell my athletes, we travel to 40 countries a year. We're not in control of all the food we get. We don't know where it's being sourced with it. So what we have to do, we have to look after two things. We have to look after the health of the blood-brain barrier, and we have to look after the health of the gut, right? So we stay away from gluten, lactose, anything that perforates the gut, that makes it easier for these things to get into the blood-brain, we completely avoid that. We're eating a lot of whole plant foods that are keeping it rich. The fiber is also creating new gut bacteria. We're trying to change the food all the time. Once your gut is healthy, and once your blood-brain barrier is intense and strong, then even if you happen to eat something that's wrong, the possibility or the impact of it is not as detrimental as if you do it consistently every single day. So we go into this as a formula as such. And as a biohacker, I have transitioned from being a heavy supplement guy to being a very, very natural guy. So I try to biohack the body in alignment with the 5 elements. So the 5 elements are what? We're looking at sun. So I'm trying to get them to get natural sun exposure, at least 15 to 20 minutes, first thing soon as they wake up in the morning, which resets the entire circadian rhythm. Now, sun, everyone talks about it as vitamin D also, critically important. But we absorb vitamin D, plants also absorb vitamin D. So taking your fruit and vegetables and just leaving them in the sun to absorb that and then eating them without cooking is a beautiful way to increase your vitamin D content, completely naturally. The second is water. People think the best way to hydrate is to drink water. That's wrong. The best way to hydrate is to eat water-rich foods. So when you heat a food, something that releases water, tomatoes, mushrooms, spinach, anything that releases water, 60% of your food, if it's water-rich foods, your hydration is far greater than drinking. If you're drinking, you're flushing everything out of it. So you got the sun, you got water. Then earth is eating whole plant-based foods, foods that come from the earth. Fire is sun. What are the other elements we're looking at? Wind. Wind is your breath work. Yeah. Your breath work balances it. The inhalation, the exhalation. Right. The inhalation is stimulating the amygdala, the exhalation is stimulating the prefrontal cortex. I tell people, most people are stressed on a day-to-day basis. The cortisol is going up. When the cortisol is going up, your body's digestion completely stops. So I tell everyone, before you eat anything, take 1 minute and just do 5 long exhalations. Just go. Once you do that, right, you stimulate the digestive and rest system. Your body's got a chance of breaking up what you're eating. If you're eating while you're stressed, it's not breaking up anything. It's going to sit there. You're going to get high indigestion. You're going to have high bloating. All of these elements are in there. So I don't know, what have I missed?
Yeah, it's really so beautiful how science, the thing you mentioned now, slow breathing can reduce the stress level. It's so beautiful how our culture has integrated in it. Our culture has integrated these facts in it, Before eating the food, we sit there, we do the namaste, pray, and that gives you at least 30 to 1 minutes of gap before you start eating the food. You feel grateful for the food that you have in front of you. But it's also reducing the stress before you are eating it.
Absolutely.
It's so beautiful how our culture has designed.
I tell people, you guys do a lot of work in meditation and breath work. Hinduism, Vedic scriptures, has an entire encyclopedia of all breath work. And I'll give you a beautiful example and a beautiful philosophy for life. At the center of all pranayama techniques is this Kapalbharti, that practice, the breath of fire, where you go. Now, if someone is teaching you that, what are they teaching you? They're teaching you forceful exhalation, forceful exhalation, forceful. That's all they say. They say push, 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 push. Not a single teacher on the planet will ever talk about the inhalation. They'll only say push, 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 push. And this is the practice that is at the heart of all breathing. This one practice. That is a metaphor for life. What is that metaphor? That metaphor is, if you worry about the giving, the inhalation takes care of itself. The receiving takes care of itself. In life, don't worry about what you're getting. Give, 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 give. The inhalation is not your job. There's a far more beautiful energy in this universe that's taking care of what you're receiving. And I really love telling the story because it sits right at the heart of spirituality.
You will become a great dad. The more I'm listening, it's excellent. This thing of giving.
The thing that you emphasized on breath work, breathing. Breath is something that's there with us from our birth till our death.
Correct.
So most of the meditation practice is also designed around breath. The focus on your breath. Now take deep breath into your belly. So there's this concept of belly breathing. Could you emphasize on it? Because when we breathe, we are supposed to inflate our belly, correct, then deflate our belly.
Yeah.
So, but when you are stressed, we generally forget to do the belly breathing and we do the chest breathing, which only fills the lung halfway.
Correct.
So it builds up tension in your muscles and you feel pain. I'm a personal trainer. I've been training people. So I've noticed whenever my client is stressed, there's a high chance that they'll develop a neck pain, the trapezius pain. Yeah. It's also known as the emotional muscle because let's say a cracker bursts somewhere near me. I do this to save my channel from head to body. So it's the emotional muscle. So when you're stressed, your trapezius get tensed subconsciously, then the pain starts. So what's one breathing exercise that you would recommend to our users so that they can relieve tension ASAP?
From an Indian context, because a lot of our followers are, I don't know.
No problem. It's not, there's no, human physiology is not Indian Caucasian. It's normal. It's the same. So here's something that I do with my athletes. Firstly, when you're working in sport, everything is the relationship which we asked beautifully, physiology and psychology. Stress is in the brain, physiology, tension is in the body. Okay. So when you're running as fast as you can't be belly breathing because you need influx of oxygen quickly. So you are going to be breathing through the chest. You can try to remind yourself, but you can't. Certain marathon runners do practice belly breathing because they're not operating at the max of their physiology. When you're operating below what's called the lactic acid threshold, the probability of belly breathing increases quite significantly. So this is why physiology is important. The fitter you are, the further away your lactic threshold is, the more likely you are to maintain belly breathing. So that's the first point. But there's something really interesting I do with all my athletes, and we do this with the physio team. Maybe we can all do this as an exercise. So what I want you to do is, I want you to breathe in, right? For 2 seconds, you can keep your eyes open. It's fine. The body doesn't, we don't need to meditate. We're just breathing. Just go in for 2 seconds. And then as you breathe out for 6 seconds, I want you to snap your finger. You can go. So go in, go. Breathe in, snap, out for 6 seconds. In for 2, snap, out for 6. In for 2. Out for 6. In for 2. Out for 6. Last time, in for 2. Snap, out for 6. Good. Now I want you to try to breathe in and snap your finger. So you notice, we did this for a minute, but you notice that as soon as you snap your finger, your inhalation stops. You want to push out.
Yeah.
Or it will convert immediately. In 1 minute, what we've done is we've rewired your brain. We've put this snap and I've linked it to your exhalation. So by doing this here right now in my sports team, When anyone sees anyone else stressed, we just do this here because that sound is already reprogrammed and all they do is they exhale. And the exhale stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system and gets them to relax. Now you can do this reframing, rewiring program with anything, with it, and the more consistently you do it, the easier it is for you to remember to do it. The biggest problem is not these techniques. The biggest problem is how do you remember to do this when you are stressed. So you got to bring something in that is very easy to do and something that you got to remind yourself to do. If you do this every day for 2 weeks, this becomes part and parcel of who you are. And you don't need to close your eyes. You don't need meditation. The relaxation stimulation programs in the body are already hardwired in us. We just need to learn how to unlock them. And these simple techniques unlock everything.
Do we have more such techniques? Do you know more such techniques? Because this is not in the public. Nobody knows these hacks. There are so many students who are stressed about exams and they are like black box. They don't know this.
There are tons of things. For example, we use something called a bliss narrative. A bliss narrative is creating a story, right? So similarly, we link a bliss narrative, which is a story that calms you down. So imagine you're walking on the beach, use your 5 senses to fill that environment. I can feel the sand between my toes, I can feel the wind on my face, I can smell the salt, I can get there, feel the body relax, and then snap. So then so repeat that story again, snap. Yeah. Repeat that story again, snap. Similarly, that snap will take you to that emotional state. So you reprogram using that visualization, using that imagery, you reprogram in this way.
I think we are using snap as something
trigger.
It's used as a trigger. But maybe I'm wrong for saying this. But let's say there's a teacher who has terrorized me in my childhood. Okay, so now she is my trigger. Her name is a trigger. So even today, if someone takes her name out, I'll get terrorized. Even I know ki I'm out of her bounds now. I'm not in her control or not in the school anymore. But still, it takes me back to my childhood days. So her name can become a trigger.
Yeah.
This trigger has been integrated very negatively in a lot of people's lives.
This is an emotional trigger you're talking about. This is a physical trigger that's triggering relaxation in the body. What you're talking about is not a trigger, it's called a schema.
Schema.
A schema. A schema is a subconscious program built in the first 8 years of our lives. Right? The research was piloted by a scientist by the name of Jeffrey Young, and you can go online and do a free assessment, which I use with all my athletes. It's called a life traps assessment or a childhood schema assessment to understand what were the programs that are built into you that determine how you show up. Now, an interesting thing, so I just did 4 days ago, I did a seminar on life traps with a whole bunch of corporates. 70% of corporate people have one single life trap. It's called unrelenting standards. Unrelenting standards means you attribute your self-worth to the outcome of your work. So you're consistently raising the bar, raising the bar, raising the bar. And I was explaining to them, people with unrelenting standards are highly successful. They have all the money in the world, they have a great life, but they have no life balance. So there's a good chance they have some chronic disease, or they're sick, or their emotional relationships or their love relationships are falling apart because there's no balance in there. Now, unrelenting standards is sabotaging everything in your life, but also bringing it in. So what schemas do is they bring in achievement, but erode fulfillment, right? That's what it is. So what you're talking about is an interesting, you're narrating a situation to me about a teacher that did that. But remember, that situation is still only present because there is a schema that's sitting below it that trigger is addressing. We need to address that schema. We need to understand what is it, was it an unrelenting standards? Was it a subjugation? Subjugation, for example, is where perhaps that teacher told you, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this, no. You heard no so much as a child that now when someone tells you no, you retaliate, you believe, hey, I can do this. So you have a tendency to make more mistakes than you normally would because your brain is completely, the word no itself, it's not the person, it's the listening of no that is the schema in present. And this was just an example. But once we start to peel away the layers of this, it's very easy to correct.
I have a very, very important question, right? How to stay young like you? What should I do in my early 20s, early 30s so that I'm younger for a longer period of time?
He's asking that because for a 44 years old, you look very fit.
And very
cool
beautiful.
and young.
Thank you very much. You guys are very kind. Living long is a science of longevity. Okay, let me break it down for you in another beautiful way. Humans have a brain. The only aspects, the only animals, the only species on the planet that have brains are species that migrate, that move. Okay. Right. In fact, there's a species of an amoeba that lives in the ocean that has a brain when it's young and it's moving. As soon as it attaches to a rock, the first thing that dissolves is the brain. So the first science of longevity is to keep movement consistent. Movement will keep you healthy. Right? That's the first and the main thing. The second thing is actually to keep the brain active, to be engaged in the process of learning every single time. Now, I'm very lucky because I work with athletes, and the occupational hazard of athletes is we move. Whether we like it or not, you're moving and someone is coming to move you. Most sedentary people don't have that. So whenever they're impacted by any stressor in the environment, the first thing they stop doing is they stop moving. And that is a downward spiral for every single thing. So the science of longevity is one, is be a student of anything. Be curious. Always be willing to learn and willing to experiment. Right? That's the first byproduct. The second is move every single day. And movement doesn't mean high intensity interval training. I'm not saying be a marathon. Even if you just go for walks, even if you just do reflective walks, anything, any amount of movement will keep the brain healthy. If you start to layer in things like eating good food, having healthy oils, all of this becomes very, very easy. In neuroscience, one of the courses I facilitate at Stanford is called the Neuroscience of Exemplary Leadership. And we talk about something called the X framework. The X framework was a byproduct of two theories, one by Professor Baba Shiv, the other by Daniel Kahneman, who won Nobel Prize for it. It says that the human brain goes through two different emotional states. It fluctuates from a feeling of calm to stressed, or it fluctuates from boredom to excitement. And type A people who are very, very successful and very balanced have an infinity loop between calm and excited. Now, how do you remain calm and excited all the time? Now, most people, as soon as they get success, they take a step back. Now, calm, everyone understands. Meditation apps are growing by the dozens every single day. A million pranayama teachers, exercising, Spartan, running, all of this. So all of this will shift your physiology and help you become a state of calm. How do you bring excitement into your life? You bring excitement to your life by associating yourself with people who think about problems of the future. Remember this. The people who think and talk about their problems now, those people will pull you down. And the future visionaries are people who think, these are the problems the world is going to get. How do we sort it out now? That is where the excitement comes in. If you can maneuver with these two levers, longevity is not even, you don't even have to worry about it. You will live a happy, healthy, beautiful life.
Yeah. So I would like to add an example here. There's this study that went on where they looked at people who got knee surgery, knee replacement surgery, and post-surgery, how their biomarkers looked like, how their health markers looked like. So it turned out, before the age of 35, they were very stagnant. Post 35, our body goes into something called sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle. So as the muscle started degrading, as they started losing the muscle, their joints started getting lesser and lesser support, because of which the knee issue came up, and then ultimately they had to replace the knee. And once the knees were replaced, the doctor suggested them to move. So now the knee is all good. They started moving. Their resting heart rate started coming down. Their blood pressure started coming down, and their diabetes started coming into control. So all these. So as you mentioned, you move to live longer. Motion is the new lotion.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Motion is the new.
Yeah,
lotion.
this I've heard this from a physio. When I was learning, he asked every one of us to ratta ye mantra ratta kar lo by heart. Motion is the new lotion.
100%, 100%. Movement is at the byproduct of everything. And you remember, we run a race against time, which means that every 6 months you are 6 months older, and biologically your body is degenerating. Movement is the only way of not preventing it, but increasing that time span.
Yeah.
Between them.
we can offset certain diseases, certain degenerative conditions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have just last one question and then we'll wrap up this introduction podcast. We will have him back. There's too much in him and it's too much less time. Just to a 20-year-old living in Gurgaon somewhere, what are the 5 things you want him to know from you? Like 5 tips or 5 things, anything, 5 message you want to be given.
The 5 messages, I think the first message I want everyone to do, and I keep saying, is measure one thing every day. Heart rate variability, even something as simple as weight, anything. Measure something. The reason why is because when you have one data point, you're able to link every single decision you've made in 24 hours to that. If you're measuring your weight, you're seeing, okay, I consumed alcohol, I ate this meal, I had dinner late, I slept late, it shifted by 0.1, 0.2. Heart rate variable, it shifted. When you have a reference point by which you can measure your decisions, it's easier to maneuver your decisions. People whose life goes catastrophically downwards are people who don't measure anything and everything catches you by surprise. The second beautiful thing is that life has everything happen to us in layers. So start to increase your awareness. The people you fall in love in layers. You don't fall in love instantly. Every day you peel away a new layer. Even when you break a relationship, it gets broken in layers. You get disconnected from your parents in layers. You build wealth in layers. You get sick in layers. This is a gift from the universe to us. It never takes anything away. It shows you the signs. So cultivate deep awareness. That deep awareness, nothing will catch you by surprise and everything will be a really, really beautiful journey. The third thing I want all of these people to know is that I've worked with some of the most successful entrepreneurs and athletes in the world. I've been to 3 Olympic Games, 2 World Cups, I've been all over and I've seen it. The most successful people do not have the answer before they start. They start. Everyone else thinks I need to have everything in order before I start. You will figure it out on the go. Never, ever, ever prevent yourself from starting, right, because you don't have all the answers. Just start and then move forward. The fourth thing is really and truly be overly critical and analytical of the people you spend your time with. You are a direct byproduct and a direct reflection of these people. I ask people, I tell everyone, if you want to do one thing, do this here. Take a pen and paper and ask yourself, imagine that you are sitting in a room with 3 or 4 of your colleagues, right? Imagine that your co-founders, your colleagues are in here. That meeting ends and one of those colleagues is going to see their parents or their loved ones. In a conversation between that person and their parents, your name comes up and they say 2 sentences about you. How would you like them to describe you? I want you to write that down. And I tell people that is your legacy. And every single day of your life, you got to wake up and give someone a reason to say that. If you don't give them a reason for that, you will die unfulfilled. You will die highly achieved, but highly unfulfilled. And even if you have nothing, you will be highly fulfilled if people remember you by what you truly want them to remember you by, And the last piece of information is really and truly what we've been speaking about completely is move. Movement has the power to shift any single emotional state. It has the beautiful ability to transition everything. Movement for many people is meditation. And through this process of moving, I want you to reflect, but not just reflect on everything that happened. I want you to find one incident in your life. For me, it was the apartheid, what the apartheid did to me. Do you know, I've been journaling my reflection on my experience in the apartheid for the past 20 years. Every 6 months, the same incident I keep writing about. Because why? When you reflect on the same moment, you're able to quantify what your emotional and spiritual growth is. I can give you the day, the month, the year when anger became revenge, when revenge became resentment, when resentment became acceptance, when acceptance became forgiveness, when forgiveness became gratitude. I can give you the day that happened because I'm reflecting on the same thing. So life is really beautiful, but life is a byproduct of what you put in. And that's what I want to tell them.
You will be a great dad. I know I'm continuing that. This is one of the best conversations I've had in like recent past. Thank you so much for your time. A part of your life. Our edit team will make sure it reaches to everyone possible in our network, and it means a lot for us that you gave us a part of your life. We had a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank
we
you,
learned
guys.
a lot.
It was
today.
an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
For those of you who don't know, he's a performance athlete. When I say performance, it's not just sports, it's the mind as well. So that's Shayamal Vallabhjee for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm pretty sure you will want him for another podcast, but do like, comment, and share so that we are motivated even more to bring him back. Thank you.